You know, football is a sport, perhaps more than any, where guarantees are hidden amongst the most unexpected. And the so-called surest things, well, they stand mockingly in the frame of the game to highlight just how flawed presumption in football can be. And it is this notion of guaranteed success that has tormented and defined many a player within the history of the game. So how do we define a player? What establishes them as good? What establishes them within the realms of cult hero status? What truly does it mean to be world class? And for those truly gifted, what makes them generational and a potential to hold a legacy within the game? You know, it's within this sphere of football immortality, pre-written from youth, crossed with undebatable talent, where we come to the first paradox and dividing figurehead of the post-noughties, new wave of social media-infused globalised football scene. The paradox of every metaphorical box being ticked to achieve generational immortality on football, and yet, the overbearing commercial and social elements that so power the modern game seemingly have played an overbearing part in how one player is defined by the game in hindsight. Or more so, maybe but a footnote in years to come. A result of attitude or circumstance will forever be debated, and yet by many, it will fall beyond the point of relevancy and effort. So how do you define a player who seemingly cannot be defined? For every attempt to draw up debate and arguments that create such a spider's web of truth and falsehoods, that simple terminologies as world-class, flop, or generational seemingly don't fit. And with the rise of the game being spoken about unfiltered online and in never-ending discourse among platforms that grow yearly like a hydra, perhaps one footballer finds their legacy being the first to be unable to be categorised. A certain Paul Pogba. Now, it's hard to believe Pogba for a start is still only 30. The journey he has had to date epitomises just how much influence, negative, positive, or maybe a little in between, he has had on English and world football. And as such, before you can assess the legacy of the man, you have to understand the story that has led the watching audience to this point. Born in the eastern suburbs of Paris, Paul Pogba joined the youth team of Ligue 2 side Le Havre in 2007, before a protracted transfer brought him to Manchester United 2 years later. After a successful run in the club's youth teams, Pogba was finally given the opportunity within the United first team 2 years later. But after only being afforded 3 appearances, he set off to Italy on a free transfer to play under the dominating juggernaut of Italian football, the old lady, Juventus. Without debate, Pogba's time at Juve was the finest of his career, and it's what first endowed him to the world and his new legion of fans. With great success, a skillful, eccentric and iconic image, Pogba quickly rose to be one of the most dominating young players in Europe. Sometimes, or rather often if we're being honest in our self-reflection of how we view the game, our memories are incredibly short in football. As such, modern day comparisons are perhaps best needed to truly summarise the levels of someone in the past. Pogba essentially was, without the price tag and UK media backing, doing what Bellingham is doing at Madrid. So think of Bellingham being in Pogba's position in 8 years' time, and you'll gain an insight into just how well respected and revered the young Frenchman was, and the levels of expectation on Pogba. For Pogba, France expects, and someday so would Manchester. On the pitch in Italy, Pogba helped the club to 4 consecutive Serie A titles, as well as 2 Coppa Italia and 2 Supercoppa Italiana. During his time in Italy, Pogba further established himself as one of the most promising young players in the world, and he received the Golden Boy Award in 2013. In 2016, Pogba was named in the 2015 UEFA Team of the Year and the 2015 FIFA Pro World 11, after he'd helped Juventus to the 2015 Champions League final, their first final within 12 years. An article from 2013 described Paul Pogba's style as, at just 20 he towers over most midfielders. He outmuscles half of them and outthinks the rest. He's supremely confident in his own ability, and that allows him to play an expressive game without the fear of making mistakes. There's every chance that when fully developed at 25, he'll be unmatched as a midfield engine, capable of dominating everyone in his path. Pogba was from the Cristiano Ronaldo lab of footballers. He was the physical perfection for the modern midfielder, along with the deftness in shot and touch, but also the ability to use power to execute when required. But as a midfielder, he had to show his footballing IQ was elite if he was really to ascend within the game at such a rapid pace. This came early on when he demonstrated an ability where Pogba was able to fill in the famed Pirlo role within the heart of Italian football's toughest environments. Pogba was able to show an ability to sit in front of defences and dictate vertical spreading of the ball and dictate tempos that even a veteran in the midfield of the park would struggle to in some of the environments in the hostile Serie A games. His time at Juventus showed how he could be exceptional in a defensive capability, but also an attacking one. And as such, he was developing at a young age into what would seemingly become the all-round modern-day midfielder. The deftness of a creator when required, and the attrition and strength of an enforcer, all within the confines of a midfield three. But if on the pitch for Juve Pogba was solidifying himself as a force to be reckoned with, it had nothing compared to off the pitch, where Pogba had established himself as a brand, developed a cult following in the heavy momentum of early days football Twitter and fandom, and seemingly had gained complete respect for his talents across the board. The stage was set for the man from Paris to use the glories he'd achieved in Italy to truly dominate the world's media and new look social media football culture by returning to the institution that is Manchester United. For a player who had the look, the confidence, and perhaps above all had shown he had the ability, how could it go wrong joining England's most dominant club of the last 2 decades? A British record transfer fee, a returning son, the perfect blend of youthful coltship harnessed around commercial dominance. Pogba had arrived to be the face of a new, exuberant, and what felt like a return to winning glory days Manchester United. At the helm, manager Jose Mourinho said the France international could be the heart of the club for the next decade. This was it for United. They seemingly landed on their feet post Moyes and Van Gaal. They had Jose, and now they had the biggest youth prospect in world football coming back to the theatre of dreams. But he was also the biggest commercial prospect, and it is within this move to the world's largest football commercial superpower that a trajectory of an image he'd never be able to shake in English football would thrust itself on Pogba. The presumption of Pogba being a brand rather than a player of substance. And with that, he'd go under spotlight that, while arguably was deserving given the fee involved, also would provide a narrative from day one that only someone truly exceptional could shake. So before a ball was kicked for the men in red, the narrative was split down the middle for Pogba. You just need to see some of the leading figures in world football and their comments on the Parisian to see this. While former France striker Thierry Henry believed he can go on to become one of the best in history, he said at the time, fellow World Cup winner Patrick Vieira described him as an extraordinary player, and so did many other icons within the game. While you had others who would say Pogba would need a maturing period, or someone like Gary Lineker at the time asked during Euro 2016 saying he was the world's most overrated player. And as divided as the opinion was, the quality of his time at United was the same. Success did come in part, a Europa League triumph with Mourinho and a League Cup as well, placing the PFA Team of the Year for 2018-19 season. That would be the extent of Pogba's individual rewards though. As for his output, with 233 appearances for Manchester United, Pogba achieved 39 goals and 51 assists. So why is this stint seen as an overwhelming failure by all? Well, circumstance and the man himself, if we're being honest. Pogba as a player and a brand was style and attitude, but this dominated over a fluctuating performance on the pitch and a team structure that wouldn't support his exuberance. Whether right or wrong, the fact Pogba celebrated in a unique, borderline immature way to some, flashy haircuts, this all overarched his success on the pitch, and that success was limited. Exuberance on and off is fine, but for most in a world of extreme football wealth, it has become more the norm that football needs to come first before the style, outside and on the pitch. The football needs to come before the brand of the player, more so in England for any foreign import. Pogba got this wrong. Now he shouldn't have to be clean shaven, short back and size to succeed, but there needed to be some give and take. Not pure Brexit ball to succeed in England, but the ability to accept the fuel you give, and then when failure comes, these predetermined opinions will roll out of control with perpetual motion until they will never stop. Narratives stick faster than ever in the modern game. Pogba's greatest mistake was creating a narrative and style that outweighed his delivery on the pitch, and more so, the cost to get him on the pitch. This was his greatest flaw. Had United been a successful football club during Pogba's stint, he would have had a barrier to protect himself from these opinions. But with United's demise and sturgid quality of football, Pogba, rightly or wrongly, became the easiest scapegoat much of the time. Pogba in England was a victim of his own hubris, but also of Manchester United's. Without the great Sir Alex to paper over some of the obvious cracks, the impending and already established juggernaut of Manchester City, the Jurgen Klopp incoming Liverpool revolution, United simply could not compete against some of the best quality football the league has ever seen. Pogba was the wrong player for the wrong club at the wrong time. and football is all about timing. But timing was his ally for the international stage. International success for Pogba reserves his legacy within France. His World Cup final performance was an example of all that is good for the Paul Pogba role on a football pitch. His role in the France team was a selfless one, creating a spear for the devastating youth of Mbappe to thrust home into any team who dared share the pitch with him. And what a fairy tale for the Paris native the World Cup win was. This would be the final glorious moment in a turbulent career, however. 2022 saw Pogba return to his former house of glory in Turin and once again pull on the famous black and white of Juventus. But this had been no glorious redemption or homecoming to reclaim past glories. In fact, Pogba has faced challenges away from sniding pundits, but from those closest to him, his own brother. In August 2022, Pogba had notified the French authorities he was being exploited by a targeted, organised gang. His brother Matthias posted videos online promising to publish great revelations about the player. The French authorities opened a case after Pogba alleged he was the victim of attempted blackmail. Pogba had earlier claimed his brother Matthias and some of his childhood friends are part of a gang which recently demanded €13 million from him. In response to this, Pogba's brother unleashed a barrage of claims, some may find very hard to comprehend in the modern day. Matthias accused his brother Paul of contacting a witch doctor with the purpose of using witchcraft to injure Kylian Mbappe. That's right, Pogba was accused by his own brother that he had used a witch doctor to injure his French teammate and arguably best player in the world, Kylian Mbappe. And what's mad is there's some truth to it. Pogba told investigators working for France's central office for the fight against organised crime that he had in fact hired a witch doctor, but he was looking to be protected against injury and also to help poor kids in Africa. Matthias was released last year under judicial review and the case continues behind the scenes. So with one crazy chapter seemingly closed, or at least put to the back of mind for the time being, Pogba seemed ready to restart again. Well, not entirely as it seems. Because what next for Pogba? Well, it's an uncertain picture and one that's almost destined to run behind closed doors for a while yet. Following the confirmation of his B sample testing positive, Pogba is facing the likelihood of a significant ban. Pogba was selected for random testing after Juve's 3-0 win at Udinese on the 20th of August, and his sample returned a positive for an increase in testosterone. Now given the positive B sample, accusations of targeted doping by Pogba are fully being pursued by the league's governing body. If found guilty of doping, he could be banned for between 2 and 4 years. Pogba will look to free his name. After all, many an athlete has faced positive results after unintentional consumption of banned substances, or substances which trigger a positive drugs test. But for Pogba, a player who amazingly at 30 feels in the twilight of his career, this may be one obstacle too far, as he continues to not only struggle with constant controversy, but a never-ending list of injuries and lack of form as a result. So for the man who left Paris as a youngster and rose to the top of world football, it's a future now that's uncertain. Uncertainty in full contrast to what was a seemingly laid out guarantee of success from the young player who grabbed the football world's attention as a skillful enigma upon the pitches of Turin. From a football perspective, it feels concluded. As much as many would hope for a return to one final dance at Pool, it's a fair assessment to say there is no more on the pitch Pogba can do to alter that anymore. And so when looking at Pogba and his legacy in world football, you have to look at that phrase, world football. Pogba was a world star. He is, still. His legacy is his influence. His legacy was to stand out and be a face of the game. Pogba in English football will never be remembered with revered hushness of greatness, nor with fondness by many. He was the epitome for so many within England, from pundits to match-going fans, of all that's wrong with the commercialisation of the game. A man whose appearances, dances, were more important than his desire to win for the team. For many, they saw it as the Pogba show. Everything was about Pogba. Well, United and England may see it that way. France and Juve will know Pogba as a player of stature, skill, and when called upon, selflessness. It will always feel a shame that football and the Premiership itself was deprived of what should have been an exuberant, forceful, in-your-face but talented enigma. But talent and timing go hand in hand, but so does humbleness and hard work. And with the media seemingly on the attack from day one, we will truly never know what is the cause of his somewhat squandered legacy. A recent Graham Souness quote, his seemingly social media dominating villain and enemy to all Pogba fans globally, said Pogba, when asked about him, was a lazy twat. And to be honest, the fact this level of quote exists when discussing Pogba as he fades into borderline irrelevancy on the world stage, and the uncertainty around his career sums up the legacy of Pogba perfectly. It's an extreme, as is everything that has followed Pogba. Everything in today's world is an extreme opinion. There is no nuanced middle ground to be found anywhere. And the issue Pogba has ultimately found is that the talent, when accompanied by injuries, hasn't proven enough to keep him at the top. Without a blanket of winning results at club levels over the last few years, the on-field narrative of Pogba will be forever extreme between those who look back on the talent against those who look back on the achievements of what someone with such talent and backing should have achieved. Maybe some witchcraft was needed all along to make it all fall into place a bit better for Pogba. Or maybe the man himself and those around him should have known the magic at his feet was not an everlasting supply. Pogba, speaking to Al Jazeera following his brother's blackmail allegations, said, "Sometimes I was just by myself thinking, I don't want to have money anymore. I just don't want to play anymore. I just want to be with normal people, so they will love me for me, not the fame, not for the money." And perhaps that epitomises Pogba's legacy, using words of the man himself. After the initial promise and glory, it only ever became about the brand and about the money. Pogba's future was a certainty until it wasn't. And as his future is now more uncertain than ever, it shows how his legacy will always be defined by the very extremes that created and moulded Pogba the player, but also Paul Pogba the brand.